Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Web Platform Podcast. This week, we are talking all about WeDeploy. With me, as always, is Justin Ribeiro.
Hi, Danny. How's it going?
And Amal Hussein.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, guys. It's been, a day or so since we recorded the last episode, so it's good to talk to you guys again.
I know it's been so long.
I've missed the sultry tones of your voice, Justin.
Oh, you're so kind.
So like I said before we started, this week we're going to be talking all about WeDeploy. Before I introduce our special guest, I'm going to kick it over to Leon, where he can deliver This Week in Web in 2 minutes or less.
Thank you, Danny. So an article titled Progressive Web Apps Coming to All Chrome Platforms by Kenneth Christiansen has just been published, which provides a look at early implementations of PWAs on desktop. Henry Zhu has just released another update on the Babel 7.0 release where he mentions some of the new features, such as the initial implementation of the JavaScript pipeline feature and a new TypeScript preset. Webpack 4 is getting closer with another beta release now available on GitHub. Puppeteer, the headless Chrome node API, has just had version 1.1.0 released, which includes an update to Chromium 66 and a host of new features. And finally, Ember.js 3.0 has just been released, which removes long deprecated APIs and support for legacy platforms. Just a quick reminder that there's still a chance to win a Google Daydream View headset by heading over to the webplatformpodcast.com/subscribe and signing up for the newsletter, and at the end of the month we'll be selecting a lucky winner. And that's everything from me for This Week in Web.
Thanks very much, Leon. Glad to see that the web hasn't exploded. So we do have a very special guest this week, Zeno Rocha. Zeno, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody.
So for those out there that maybe are not familiar with you or haven't listened to or haven't been longtime listeners of the Web Platform Podcast, give us a short introduction about yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what you like.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Zeno. I work at Liferay. It's a company based in LA, where I live today. I'm originally from Brazil. I moved here, I guess, like 3 years ago, and I'm enjoying so far. I love California. But yeah, today I work mostly as a developer advocate. So I lead a team of 4 developer advocates here. But I'm originally like a front-end developer. That's what I love. That's what I do on my free time. I love the web. It's the thing I'm most passionate about. So if I could summarize who I am, I'm just a person that likes to create things and share with other people.
That sounds fantastic. I'm sure many of us here and many of those listening would share those interests.
Yeah, I'm curious though. How many stars at this point do you have on Clipboard.js, Zeno?
Yeah.
Like 20 something thousand at this point. Like if stars were money, like
yeah, it would be awesome, right?
You've been in the open source game a long time. I think there's not a lot of folks out there who have probably not run into your stuff over the years. So and you were an early guest on the show so many years ago now.
Yeah, man. Like open source for me is like the best thing. When I started to like develop for the web, I remember like very clearly like learning and being so excited about everything. And when you start, you figure out that you have this like power, right? So I was like in an internship and doing all those stuff. And then when people from your family, they discover that you know how to do web development, they come after you. They go and they say, hey, can you build a site for me? Can you do this? Can you do this freelance for me? And I started to get like lots of freelance. But then I realized that I was like, man, there's this other thing called open source where I spend more time doing and I don't get any money back, but hey, it's more exciting than doing freelance. So I jumped right into it and I continue doing until today. It's awesome.
So Zeno, I'm so happy to have you on the show today because you're kind of like this internet famous person who was also on the podcast before even Danny and I joined. I don't even know if Justin was on the podcast at that point. I don't know. You were in the first.
I don't think so. No, I wasn't. That was all Eric.
Yeah, the founder of the podcast. So I'm wondering. you talk about web superpowers, and
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're here to talk about today is this awesome new product this platform called WeDeploy,
Mm-hmm.
continuous deployment and continuous integration platform. And I remember the first time like I used Docker, and the first time many years ago I used my first CI tool. Like it kind of gave me superpowers when it
Mm-hmm.
came to the ops experience, the ops part of development. And it seems like WeDeploy kind of gives developers that same superpower, superhero feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us about WeDeploy? What is it? What's the value prop? What problem are you solving? And who's your audience?
Nice. Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned the last time I was in the web platform podcast, because I was checking. I was like, it just entered the link, and it was 2014. And I don't quite remember what we talked about, but from the description, we talked some things about custom elements.io. So at that time, I was doing this website where people could like just discover and explore web components created by the community for community members. And I remember building that site. It was pretty much like Heroku with some like Node.js backend, and I needed search, so I started using Elasticsearch, and then I needed a place to host Elasticsearch, and then I needed like a Redis cache, and then I needed a place to host this Redis cache. So I was using all those tools and even other projects. And then I realized like how fragmented the whole experience of deploying things to the web was. And at the same time, a coworker of mine was experiencing the same things. And we sat down to build something that could make developers more productive. That was the whole premise, and that's still until today what we care the most. Like when we think about, okay, what we're going to build next or what we're going to do next, we always think about how we can make developers, and we are developers, so how we can make ourselves more productive as well, not only other people. So that's what we set out to do. And we created this thing called WeDeploy, which is basically, it's actually not like a platform for CI. It's mostly a deployment platform. So if you need to put things in the cloud, that's the place to go. So we're trying to do like a very easy developer experience, and we have a bunch of other tools on it. So it's really nice. Like it's pretty much a place where you can not only host your sites, but also you can help build your site. So for example, I don't know if you guys know Firebase. Firebase is a good example of a platform that offers you services that you can just like plug in your app and start developing, and it facilitates your development. So we have some of those things as well. So we have a place where you can put your sites and also a way for you to develop faster. That's the whole point.
So ironically, we have Firebase. We have David East, who's on the Firebase team, who's going to be on our show in a few weeks. And
Nice.
and so we're going to be releasing this show right after Firebase, and so it'll be great for our audience to like compare the two platforms. So Firebase is obviously extremely mature and has like this Google engine, right? I mean, all of the Play Store services combined with Firebase, it's a kitchen sink at this point, and so I guess and that's awesome to some degree, but I guess is WeDeploy a more focus? Are you trying to have a more focused scope?
Yeah, basically, and I use Firebase a lot. I love Firebase as well. But whenever I would build a project on Firebase, the whole, like, I couldn't finish my whole project over there. That was basically my point. Like, I was using, for example, the real-time database, or I was using their authentication service. But then if I had something with a different backend that was not, or like a plain static page, if it was not that, I wasn't able to use it. If it was a Node.js backend, I would have to host on Heroku. Today they have something for this, but even like, let's say you have a PHP application and a Ruby service, and then you have this other thing. So you cannot have like your whole development cycle, and that's what we're trying to solve. Like have this one platform where you can have those powerful services that will make you more productive. If you don't want to build like your whole database, you don't want to build like the whole storage, you don't want to build authentication, but can also be flexible enough that if you want to build your own Docker file and you want to just hit a button and deploy it, you can.
So I guess could you maybe break down what pieces of the deployment stack and infrastructure WeDeploy provides, right? So, you said that you can even host your web apps on WeDeploy servers. So I'm assuming there's obviously a cloud hosting component, and then is there like a config management piece? How do tools like Chef, which help you kind of manage your infrastructure config options, source control. I'm just curious, kind of like what pieces of the pie is WeDeploy.
Sure. So basically, like once you log in, there are two ways you can go. One, you can go like straight to this console, this dashboard, where you have like a catalog of things you can put it on the cloud. So some of them are like WeDeploy data. So it's like a database that you can think of similar as Firebase. There's like WeDeploy Auth, which is something like Auth0. And then you have like WeDeploy email, which is something like SendGrid, So if you want to send emails, you need a service. So you're going to have to rely on something. So you can install those things, or you can just go to your computer and then you open your project. Let's say you have a folder with like a package JSON. And like, again, comparing to others, like, I don't know if you guys know Now. It's also like a very good reference that if you want to put something, it's very simple. Like you have a package JSON and then you hit like a command on your terminal and then it sends to the cloud and it hosts this. So if in our case, if you have like, you can put this WeDeploy.json file and just specify, okay, this is my port that I want to specify. This is how many CPUs. This is how many memory, how much memory I want. And this is like a Node.js application or a Ruby application. So we try to detect based on your code base, but if we can't, you can just specify that. Or if you have a Docker file, we just read your Docker file, and then we build it and we deploy for you. So that's basically like, in practical terms, the process how people interact with the platform.
And when it comes to interaction, you guys have quite a swath, actually. We're talking about just simply the deployment state of sort of deploying sort of your application to those things. But WeDeploy actually has quite a bit of services. You guys have Auth, you guys have sort of NoSQL Store, you guys have plugin sort of service stacks. And interestingly enough, you guys actually have email as well. You guys have an email service that's relatively integrated and nicely to work with. I mean, how did you guys start to sort of build out that thing? I mean, it's not easy to go from I want to run a website to I want to run a whole bunch of apps with various infrastructure. Like this must have been quite the internal challenge initially.
Yes, and it still is. It's like a very because our premise has always been how can we be more productive. It's not like one day we all sat in a table and then we're like, yeah, let's build this with like this and that feature and that's it. So it's very organic. It first started in like this is a nice question because a few weeks ago I did a presentation on like how this whole thing developed, and it was just like so funny to see like pictures of the first mock-ups and how crazy they are compared to today. Because initially we just wanted to have a way to put your microservices in the cloud. And then we started with that. And then we realized, okay, this is not enough. People still have their own code that they have to run. If they have a WordPress, they still need a way to host their WordPress. like you can't put your whole WordPress on Firebase, or you can't put your WordPress somewhere else. You don't have like this unique place. And then, okay, now that we figured out this part, but people sometimes they don't want to build the whole app by themselves. They want to build from something else. They want to build on top of it. So then we created these APIs, like, okay, now we have auth, now we have email. But then once you have those APIs, how you facilitate for someone that is just starting, someone that maybe is not a web developer, it's an Android developer. So then there's another phase like SDKs. So then you create SDKs for iOS, for Android, for the web, and then it has to work with Node, it has to work with React Native. So things start to emerge, and then you have to adapt. So it's been like quite a journey, but it's really like the whole process of building a product. It's really interesting. It's not something that happens overnight. You know, I've been learning a lot, and it's been quite an experience.
So so you said you're learning a lot. There are a bunch of challenges that you guys had to solve to make this happen. But it also needs to be easy. Well, it needs to be as easy as possible, right? So a couple of questions. So one kind of around the CLI that's available, and just some of the tools that are there. How easy is it really to get started? So say somebody like me who is a web developer, say I have a single page app and I want to deploy it. How easy is it to do that? And then more in general, how do you balance flexibility and being able to do all of the things that a wide range of developers require versus making it as straightforward as possible?
Yes, that's a great question. And it's something that we think all the time. Like the balance of building something that is simple with something that can be, for example, like enterprise ready, is so difficult. And we always challenge ourselves to not go either to one side or to the other. Like we have to be somewhere in the middle. So for example, you talked about the CLI. That's a good point. So the CLI was something that we, from the start, we're like, hey, we need something that is, for example, easy to be distributed. So like we have people on the team that they know Node.js, for example, so that's a good thing. But even like the process of building a CLI with Node.js and how you distribute for Windows and other operating systems is not as easy as, for example, Go. So we decided to use Go because it was going to be like a much smaller bundle that people could install in any platform. Nice. So we built the CLI with Go. And today, if you have this exact same stack that you mentioned, so I don't know, think about like, okay, you have an application with React, and if it's a single page app, you could be using just like straight static pages, or if you want some backend, you're probably going to use, I don't know, Next.js or Nuxt.js. So in order to be really simple, what we do is, okay, you first install the CLI, and then you type deploy, just that. And then it's going to ask you, okay, what is the project that you want to, what is the name of the project? And then you specify the name, and then we're going to and then what is the name of this application that you're building? And then you specify that, because you can have multiple kinds of applications in the same project. So for example, you can have WordPress with MySQL, with, I don't know, PHP MyAdmin, something like this. So then you type this, and then we're going to deploy it for you. So we are going to try to guess based on your code base, what is this application? If it's a package JSON, we interpret as a Node.js thing, and then we're going to check the npm start script and execute that. If it's, I don't know, a Docker file on your project, we're going to see that it's a Docker file. Then we're going to run all the steps in order to build that image, generate that image, and then read the ports, read the environment variables, all those things that you need in order to put this thing exposed to the web. And then we're going to deploy it. But if you wanted something more complex. Let's say the whole Elasticsearch stack. So if you want Elasticsearch with Kibana and Logstash, and you need a place to put that, we want to be easy and do that as well. So we also have like a very easy way to do this. You have like 3 folders, and then each one you put on this WeDeploy JSON. Okay, I want Elasticsearch, I want Kibana, and I want Logstash. And then we fetch those things from Docker Hub, and then we deploy it for you. So we try to be as simple as we can. But if you have a very like enterprise, big business application, we also want you to be able to do that. So we have like volumes and things like that that are really important for enterprise companies.
So how difficult would a service like this have been before something like Docker? Like, is this only possible because we can build on top of things like Docker?
Yeah. So Docker is a very from my perspective, when we started building this, there was no Docker, and we're not planning to host anything. And when we looked into Docker, we realized how powerful that was. And it's powerful in many ways. Like I think what Docker brought to the table was something that we haven't seen it before, which was like a very simple way to have things modularized, which is what we always try to solve with like any technology, right? Like if you think, like I mentioned web components, we're trying to be modularized on the front end level. What React did also, it was like game changing because you were able to create very simple components, and they were modularized, and they were also like very easy to work on and everything. And I think Docker brought this to the DevOps world, which is a world that is not, they don't see that very often, like tools that are very easy for them to use. It's usually like a very complicated setup for people to put their own infrastructures in the cloud. If you're using something like AWS or Google Cloud Platform, sometimes like if you are building like a weekend project, you're going to have to spend a lot of time trying to figure all that out. So I think Docker was a very good solution, and we're trying to take the most of it.
So I'd never thought that I would hear Docker compared to React, but I totally get your analogy. Docker and generally containers are not a new thing, but Docker kind of made namespacing popular. Being able to share configs universally. So, my question to you, Zeno, is like speaking of the container architecture. So, a lot of people have tools that they love, like Kubernetes. Lots of container orchestrators, things like Chef. How do external tools fit into the WeDeploy platform? Like, is it a monolithic platform where you can't bring your own tools, or is it like totally friendly? Is it this pluggable platform? Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a good question because it goes a little bit deeper into the platform. So, for example, this concept of a project that we have is in fact from one side is like this virtual box where you put your containers, but also from one side is a Docker network. So the good thing about that is that then you can have multiple projects, multiple containers on the same network, and then you can talk to them using just the host name of the container. So you don't have to expose them to the web directly. And we have Docker Swarm running behind the scenes. And those are all things that we don't expose as much because we're trying to lots of people don't want to know that, but there's still lots of people that do want to know that. So we try to find this balance, which is very hard. But if you want to use something like Kubernetes, if you want to use something like Chef, maybe you're going to go to another solution. Over here, we try to be a little bit more simplified. We do run those things internally, but we try not to expose them as much.
That's really interesting. So, because you don't expose them as much, I'm wondering. I would assume that your target audience is probably either like independent developers or small or medium companies that maybe don't have the ability to have like an expert DevOps team in house, and because I'm just wondering, like some platforms kind of allow for this like low floor, high ceiling model, right? Like low floor meaning it's easy to get started and anyone can kind of get play around with it, and it's a high ceiling because it's infinitely you can build infinitely complex things and you can go as deep as you want to go, right? And so WeDeploy is kind of, at least for now, is kind of gating. It seems like it's gating the level of control and how dirty kind of people can get with their configs and with their cloud infrastructure. Am I right?
Yeah, and because in the end we don't want to be like another AWS or another Google Cloud platform. We want to try to be something that is you can get started easily and you can put your projects out there. Just because we think nowadays the time to market is like one of the most important things, and more people just want to put their stuff out there. So if you are in this kind of profile and you want to do that. That's for those people that we're trying to build a platform.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm like high-fiving you guys because you're solving a big problem. For me, this is like a very interesting white space, right? Like you have tools like Firebase that are really like almost too much. They're almost like there's too much abstraction, right? And then there's AWS and Google Cloud where it's like, okay, it's too intimidating, like and so WeDeploy kind of seems to be fitting into this nice space of like you can bring your own config and bring your own containers into the mix easily, but you don't have to also get caught up in how to scale this best, how to orchestrate your containers. So it's kind of really interesting. Like this is kudos to you guys for that's a good white space. So, yeah.
And you nailed it. Like it's super difficult for me to always like describe and compare to others because it's always like. If I go to a front-end conference, so I'm like among those front-end developers, so they know Firebase, for example. So I will say, hey, WeDeploy is like Firebase. We have those functionalities, but we also do this. But if I'm in like, I don't know, like a Java conference with more like DevOps guys, I will say, hey, WeDeploy is like OpenShift from one side because you can launch your containers, but hey, we also have those services if you want to build your projects faster. So you can choose either one of those paths. We're not like forcing anything, but we are providing all those too. So it's up to you. For example, this weekend I was building the website of my wedding. So I was like, hey, I need just a RSVP. Okay, so I don't want to set up this whole database. I just want to put something over there. And when someone puts their RSVP over there, they confirm, I'm going to send an email, So I don't want to go to all these different providers or set up accounts in different places and understand their APIs and their pricing for each one of them. But I also don't want to go to like this one big thing like AWS where it's super difficult to set up. So we're trying to somehow fit in the middle. And so that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
I mean, it's a really cool white space, and I'm really eager to see your progress, as you guys grow. And so for folks that, obviously monitoring is a pretty important part of like, an app in the wild. Can you tell us about the types of like monitoring tools and services that are available through the WeDeploy dashboard?
Yes. So when you have a project, and in my case, like I just logged in on mine, I have like 79. I have like lots of projects, but you can have like, so there are things that you can monitor, and one is like how much CPU your system is, your application is consuming, how much memory, how much data you're transferring in and out, and we also have health checks to see if your container is up or down, and you can define your own health check if you want. So if you run a run a command, like shell script, or if you just want to check if a certain endpoint returns 200, you can do that as well. So, and you can also filter those metrics by the number of instances that you have. So you can scale your services like, oh, I want like 5 instances of, I don't know, Postgres or whatever, like whatever application you want to scale, you can just like define this scale property on your WeDeploy JSON on this dashboard, and then we scale. So that's pretty much the metrics we have. It's very basic from one level, but if you want to do something more specific, let's say you want to use New Relic or you want to use Dynatrace, you can also just connect those things to your app and have more data. But we try to be simple on the metrics as well, not just like 4 different aspects, and also storage. So just 5 different aspects that you can check on your metrics.
It is a tough thing to do. I mean, you're trying to find the sort of the sweet spot when it comes to that sort of management of things, because with it, the space is so convoluted now with the various sort of cloud providers and service tooling that everybody loves metrics until there are too many metrics.
Yeah, that's true.
You're like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what does that mean? My app is running good? Is it on fire? Like, I don't know. And sort of extracting away that pain seems to be something that WeDeploy does quite well. And I want to point out too that when you talk about deploying apps on there, you guys have a massive amount of demo sort of deployment examples in you guys' GitHub repository.
Yeah.
I mean, everything under the sun, like, really.
Yeah, because like basically even like through our support, people just ask like, hey, so yesterday a guy asked, how can I put a Nuxt.js app on WeDeploy? So if they don't know exactly what to do, we just go and we create a repo and we say, hey, here it is. So this morning we shared, and then it's nice because then the Nuxt.js guys retweeted, and then like those things grow, right? And so this morning there was a guy saying, hey, I want to put my Laravel project. What do I need? And then we go and then we create some demos. So the demos are nice because it shows the things that it's possible to do and maybe you didn't know before. So that's nice.
Yeah, the config sort of JSON file that you guys use for WeDeploy is also very it's very easy to sort of grasp. It's not I'm just perusing here the GitHub repository, and I'm looking at sort of the Ghost deployment on there. Very simple, it's 7 lines, 8 lines of just the things you would need. Very much looks somewhat kind of like maybe a Docker Compose file to some extent.
Exactly, yeah.
But easy for someone who's not necessarily into ops, who would want to maybe try it. It seems like a good leap point into, I'm okay with this because I don't have to worry about breaking the entire internet when I deploy this thing today.
Exactly. Now you have a place to put your headless Chrome images on the web.
You know it. I'm always looking for a spot to put headless Chrome.
Yeah. Or any of the other 101 useless containers that you've made,
my containers are super useful. Like, I get work done.
I think everybody likes to think their containers are useful, just like how everybody thinks their children are like smart and well behaved, anyways. But so you know what, Seno, I just want to make this point to you and also to our listeners is that a lot of times like developers concern themselves very much with things like performance and these like little micro benchmarks, for example, right? But it's like less than 5% of sites on the internet actually like need that type of optimization.
Mm-hmm.
And people seem to like, that's all they talk about is these stupid performance benchmarks. And it's like, really, like, no, at the scale that you're at, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But to in that same vein, I think WeDeploy, I think majority of use cases for being able to just deploy a simple web app are fairly simple,
Mm-hmm.
and WeDeploy solves that problem nicely for a good chunk of apps on the web, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and while giving you advanced features if you want to kind of dig in a bit more. So in that sense, I think it's cool. And for people who are like, trying to, who kind of like talk to you about all these complex features and, who ask like, why don't you guys have that? And it's like, well, if the reality is like, if you need these types of features, you're probably like a Fortune 50 company and like
Yeah,
buy WeDeploy and we'll write a custom feature for you,
exactly. Yeah, you're gonna have your own like IT
pretty
team with
much.
100 people at least. That's
Right.
true.
But that being said, like, so comparing other products in the space that you're in, like, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
curious, like, what type of value proposition you have over something like, now, right? Site
Mm-hmm.
now. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, Zeit, and I know Guillermo. Like, I remember I met Guillermo in maybe 2012 in Argentina, and I have to share this video with you guys. Like, I'm gonna share later and you can put on the on the podcast if you want. But basically, what Zeit is doing, and we started to do at the same time. It's very similar from one point, but again, it still doesn't fit. At least from my experience, the projects that I'm running, where sometimes I have like very basic things. I think I could run on now very easily. I think it would be awesome. But I still have some things that I can't run on now the way I would love. So, for example, databases is one case. So, if I have, I don't know, like Redis or Elasticsearch or MySQL, Postgres, whatever, it's something that is not capable of doing now. If I have something that I need to persist data and I need volumes and I need to store my data over there, and when I like restart my for example, my database, I'm not going to lose any data. So those are some of the limitations. And again, like we are similar to now in the sense that we deploy stuff, but then now doesn't have those, let's say, Firebase-like features like a database or things that even that Firebase doesn't have, like email. So it helps on the deployment side, and that's what we're similar with, but it doesn't help with building things faster. So somehow we're trying to tackle both, and that's why it's always difficult to compare. But now is also like a really great reference, and those guys are doing a really good job as well.
yeah, no, they're doing a really great job, and I have to say that like the lack of support for volumes is
Mm-hmm.
like a pretty big. I mean, I kind of think
Mm-hmm.
of now as great for static sites almost,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because of that, it just makes it a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, thank you so much for explaining that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, like, I guess who's using WeDeploy in the wild now. If you can share that, and potentially if you can also share some of the success stories that are around that.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Sure. So basically, and I'm opening my metrics dashboards at the same time I talk. So basically, we had like around 30,000 deployments already. So there's lots of people using it, and we had like many different use cases. So we have, of course, like people closer to us using. So we have like an event organizer in Brazil using the platform. So for them, they have a stack with two different Node.js applications, and they just wanted a place to put it over there. First, they had like this initial static site on GitHub Pages, But then that was not enough, because on GitHub Pages you can run out other things. So they eventually moved to WeDeploy. We have like a construction company here in LA that is using WeDeploy for their website, also like with like a different stack, like WordPress and something else. And then we have like bigger guys. So because the company that I work for, there's lots of like big clients. So we are entering those big clients, and some of those names I can't say it because it's still like work in progress. But then like really big companies trying out, and because there's one possibility that I didn't mention, which is you could run WeDeploy in your own infrastructure, which is like a crazy thing, but it's something more similar to, let's say, OpenShift, what OpenShift does from Red Hat. So there's like so many possibilities and many different use cases, from like wedding websites to like those big guys trying out and deploying things internally or externally. So it's been really like a very different range from Ruby, Java, PHP, like all languages and all kinds of people using. But of course, the most common ones are what people usually, like the easiest ones, right? Like static hosting is one, Node.js is one, the data service is really popular, the Alf service is really popular. So those are the ones that people use the most and love the most.
I do find it interesting that with a tool like WeDeploy, it harks back to a time when the web was somewhat easy to throw things around. And again, I'm probably just being old at this point, because in the olden days we had things like FTP,
Yeah,
or, secure FTP, if you like. I hoped, and you can still skep stuff around and whatnot, sure, but there was always a barrier to entry for a lot of folks to make the leap onto sort of what, the open web. I could sit there in Notepad and jot down code, and I could see it run on my browser. But if I wanted to go ahead and put that somewhere, there was a massive amount of steps developers used to have to go through when they were starting out to sort of see and share those sorts of things. You had to find a hosting provider. Usually they had some archaic sort of thing and login credentials that you had to use. In the olden days, it was never secure. If you were lucky, it was secure. And then someone would break into your FTP server and just host things on there that you don't want. And if you had a university account, maybe you had some public hosting there for your user. But tools like WeDeploy, they really sort of simplify the amount of effort required to go from this thing runs on my desk to, oh hey, now I can share it with everybody else. I think that's important. I mean, otherwise, I think we lose a lot of people in the cycle of, man, it's too hard to deploy things. It's too hard to ship this.
Yeah, and I think like there are very few people in the world that like really care about developer experience, right? Like, I think if I could like put on my hands like the number of people that I know that that they are dedicated and they know how to build things for developers is not as much. Like when you think about how you structure, like even from your landing page, what is the information you put? Do you put like a code snippet or not? And in your documentation, like you have a copy to clipboard button or not? Do you have like a good syntax highlight? When you copy the code from the docs, does it copy the lines as well? Like those were like very small things that you can build and have like a whole like nice development experience. I don't think there are many people in the world doing that. Like we see, at least from my experience when I use, for example, AWS, it's something that is like, it takes like a long time just to understand. And when you use, you don't feel like happy or satisfied because it's like this, I don't know. It's not only about design itself, like being pretty to the eyes. It's mostly like when you type a command on your terminal, like the feedback you receive is this, like how the loader looks like even like really small things from big things, So I think there's like such an enormous opportunity over there for people that are building stuff for developers. And I think it's not an easy task. It's very difficult. But if you put your mind into it, I think there's a lot of good opportunities out there.
Yeah, when it comes to documentation, like you see that a lot, right? Where, oh, here, I've written down everything that this thing does, and that should be good enough. Read my 45 pages worth of documentation. That and a lot of the AWS is a good example of this, and some of their documentation has admittedly gotten better, but to grok it and understand it in any sort of human time span when you just need to get something done, I don't envy the folks who have to make that first leap, who've not used that sort of infrastructure, because that is hard. Making docs that address user need and the things that users want to do now. That's a fine touch, right? That is not something that is particularly simple to do.
Exactly. And you're talking about like people, like we're saying that to us, right? Like people who are in the web for a while, how many docs we read in our lives, like many.
Oh, so
and
many.
Still, yeah. And it's still like really difficult. So imagine for someone who's just starting, I think like before in the past, it was just like, okay, generate your docs from your code because you don't want to be writing stuff. Put your docs out there, people will consume it, and that's good enough. I don't think that's the case nowadays. Like if you check projects like Angular, so if you go to angular.io, you're gonna see, for example, they have docs that are specific to people that are starting with the framework. So like getting started that are really like do this, do that, and do this, and this is the result. And then you have another type of docs, which is, okay, actions that you're going to perform at some point in your journey. And then you have API docs where you go into detail. And the API docs is like merged with the docs. And when you search both. So like there's just like those small things, like you have like a reading progress on your docs, or you have like a section that you can get feedback from your docs, you like, I don't know, like Facebook or Slack where you have reactions, you could just put like 3 emojis and you say, hey, was this doc helpful or not? So I guess like there's so much opportunity nowadays to build things that are much nicer for developers, because we developers were not used to those nice things. It's always been hard for us. We always have to like sometimes go to the source code to discover something that could be explained on the docs.
Yeah, Zeno, I completely agree with your points. I actually, it's also annoying when maintainers write all the docs sometimes because most maintainers have so much context in their brains that they don't realize other people don't have. So that's always a tough one. But yeah, I just want to make a corny joke, my classic corny joke per podcast. So Justin, you talked about being old on the web, and I have to go feed my.
Go ahead. I'm waiting for it.
I can't even say it. I have to go feed my ravens after we're done recording. Just kidding. All right, it's fine. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I had to go there, guys. All right, back to the regularly scheduled show.
Oh man. Yeah, so we're actually we're starting to run out of time here, but I had one point that I wanted to make, and then one last question, Zeno. We very quickly glossed over the fact that you can run all of this stuff on your own infrastructure, that you don't have to use it in the cloud, and that's actually a very big deal. And I know I've mentioned it on the show before, but I did federal contracting for a number of years. And sometimes you don't get to use a lot of fun or like convenient tools because a lot of times things have to be running locally. They have to be on boxes inside of these buildings. So that is that's actually a very, very cool thing. Is that something that's only available to, for example, like to enterprise customers and that kind of thing? Or is it something that other folks can get involved with?
Yeah, so last year I went to like lots of those like conferences in like Europe with people with suits, and it's so weird to always see developers with suits. But anyways, and like that's the number one thing they always asked. Like, hey, I have even like legislations that say that my data needs to be in my country, so I can't use your platform. Period. You know. So this is something we're exploring. It's not exposed. It's not. We are running some experiences. Some experiments to see if that's something that we're gonna make it available in the future. But yeah, we're definitely looking into it because we know the limitations for lots of folks.
Awesome. So that actually leads into my my final question pretty well, which is, what is on the roadmap? What does the next year or two look like for WeDeploy?
Nice. Yeah. So some of the things we're working right now is, for example, things that maybe you have seen before, but we don't have yet. For example, a deploy button that you can put on your README. So when you click on it, it's gonna deploy to WeDeploy. So like a one-click thing that you put anywhere, and it's gonna read the content for, let's say, your GitHub repo or GitLab repo or Bitbucket, and then it's gonna deploy. So a very famous case of this is like Rocket Chat, which is a Slack alternative. And people love to use Rocket Chat on their own services, their own servers, because they don't want to have the limit of messages, for example, or they want to have the controls of the message. They don't want to share the message with someone else. So like if you could just have this button on the README of the project, and then you click it, and then you deploy your Rocket Chat. Nice, cool. So we're working on this, and then we have other things, always like improving to make like our volumes faster. So we are on a milestone that we're working on this. So just like many things going on. Also on the mobile side, we want to have a better mobile story. We know that mobile development is growing more and more and more. So we are investing on maybe like a push notification service, something like this that we can offer out of the box. So we're exploring some areas around those different ways. It's so difficult because it's like a polyglot platform. So there's so many ways and so many different inputs from everywhere. But it's the one thing I can assure is features that will make you more productive.
That's super cool. I'm going to be watching WeDeploy very closely. Like I said, I'm super interested in the white space that you are in, and the fact that you can run this stuff on your own infrastructure, like Danny said, is huge. I've done consulting for, DoD-based projects, for example, and it's just, you want to use the cloud, you want to use lots of fun services, but you really can't because of limitations, like you said. So that's a really interesting and additional segment to the white space that you're in. So I guess to wrap up the show, I guess before we wrap up, I'm just going to make another corny joke and just let you guys know that I only develop, like, until I put on like a suit and tie, I'm not writing software. So, you guys said it was weird to see developers. You guys, I don't know what you're talking about, guys. It's the only way to write code is like in a 3-piece suit. So
okay. First off, that's how I started. So.
Well, actually, it's funny that you say, it's funny because actually, I don't think I've ever seen Justin not wear a suit. I think I've seen you wear a sweater maybe once, but you're always wearing a suit. So Justin is legit. I'm like not kidding. He's like always wearing a suit.
I don't always. So
you like own a company, so I get it. You own a company. And
I don't wear suits as much as I used to, but I don't detest a good suit. I'm not gonna not gonna suit.
Well,
you're like the Tobias of suits. You're like never
really. The Tobias.
Never unsuited.
Well, when Justin first started, he had to try to get to the front of the punch card line to get his jobs run. So he had to try to look sharp.
So,
very
fact.
Nicely done. Oh, that's a good one. I like that one.
Well, yeah. Fun fact. Also, my mom has a computer science degree, and she received it in the late 70s, early 80s. She's class of 80. And so she used punch cards, and she always tells me about that. So
That's really cool.
A fun fact of the day. Yeah, it is pretty cool. But anyway, so Zeno, to wrap up, WeDeploy. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us about how developers can get started on WeDeploy? What resources are available? What are the community groups around WeDeploy?
Nice. Yeah. So basically, I think the best way is even just go to WeDeploy.com, because we have there are different ways you can go on the docs. You can just go and read the docs, or if you want a step-by-step tutorial, we have that as well. So just pick whatever is that you're most interested on. Oh, I want to put a static hosting site, or I want to work with, I want to put a WordPress, or whatever it is, the case you want. You can check those tutorials, and I'm going to put a link on it. And just start exploring. And if you need help, we have a Slack where people hang out and talk about all sorts of things. But yeah, or just reach me out and I can help for sure. So if you have any questions with front end, WeDeploy, whatever, it doesn't have to be WeDeploy. I'm open to help with anything.
Mm-hmm. How to pick out a tie while before coding.
Yeah.
But so is there anything that we missed today? And we'll link everything that you mentioned in the show notes so people can find it. But is there anything else that we missed today? Any burning points that you wanted to make about WeDeploy before we wrap up?
Oh, I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time. It was awesome.
This was so fun. Thank you. And then lastly, where can people find you on the web if they want to follow you on Twitter or your blog or anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Zeno Rocha on Twitter. So it's ZNOROCHA. And that's pretty much everywhere. Instagram, GitHub, whatever you want to go. That's the same username.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Justin, do you want to close this out?
Sure. Today we've talked about WeDeploy with our friend and colleague, Zeno Rocha. We hope that you've learned something new today on the Web Platform Podcast, and we hope you join us next week when we talk more things web and discuss all the upcoming things that are going to make your development life easier. Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye, everybody.